threat for humanity. The alarm bells are deafening. Wildfires, floods, and hurricanes. Extreme climate events warn of impending doom. Is the world heading towards a climate catastrophe? Watch WION's Climate Tracker, weekdays at 12 p.m. GMT, 5:30 p.m. IST.
You don't know how to fix the holes in our ozone layer. You don't know how to bring the salmon back up a dead stream. You don't know how to bring back an animal now extinct. And you can't bring back the forest that once grew where there is now a desert.
You have ignored us in the past and you will ignore us again. We have run out of excuses and we are running out of time.
Show us your faithfulness. Show us your trustworthiness. Show us your honesty. Prove us wrong. We desperately need you to prove us wrong. God help us all. If you fail to prove us wrong, God help us.
One trillion species. 7.8 billion humans. 1.9 million species extinct. One planet. Where are we heading? What should we do?
Watch Climate Tracker, only on WION. World is one.
There are many other additions, right? Arab?
Hello and welcome to WION Live Broadcast. I'm William Denslow from New York, and these are the headlines of the hour. The United Nations says more than 5 million people have fled Ukraine since the Russian invasion on February 24th. More than 150 people have been wounded in clashes between Palestinian demonstrators and Israeli police at Jerusalem's Al-Aqsa Mosque compound. China must pay a greater price for backing Russia's invasion of Ukraine, a senior United States senator said during a trip to Taiwan, in which American lawmakers vowed that Washington would not abandon the island. Shanghai residents scuffle with hazmat-suited police, ordering them to surrender their homes to COVID-19 patients, as discontent rises over China's inflexible COVID response. Former British citizen and member of the notorious Islamic State cell known as the Beatles, Al-Shafi al-Sheikh, is found guilty for the deaths of 4 American hostages in Syria. South African authorities release emergency funds to help tens of thousands of people left without shelter after flash floods washed away homes and roads and killed almost 400 people on the country's east coast. A jury in the United States has convicted a former British citizen for the abuse and deaths of 4 Americans. The convict Al-Shafi al-Sheikh is a member of the brutal Islamic State cell known as the Beatles. He's guilty of 4 counts of hostage-taking and 4 counts of conspiracy related to the deaths of 3 men and a young woman who were captured during the Islamic State's rampage through Syria in 2012 and 2013. The group is nicknamed the Beatles for their British accents. El-Sheikh and his co-conspirators had worked together to kidnap and abuse more than 24 Western hostages in Iraq and Syria. El-Sheikh is the most prominent member of the Islamic State to be brought to trial in the United States. He was captured in Syria by a Kurdish-backed militia in 2018, and he tried to flee to Turkey. The verdict capped an emotionally charged 2-week trial that featured the testimony of 35 witnesses, including 12 former captives. The testimonies detailed relentless beatings, sexual abuse, waterboarding and killings perpetrated by the cell of 3 to 4 radicalised young Britons. In August 2020, the then US Attorney General William Barr even agreed to waive a death penalty against the men in exchange for cooperation from British prosecutors. But the United Kingdom eventually shared key evidence in the crucial case, including email exchanges between El-Sheikh and his family. The families of the victims have worked for years to secure a conviction and have pressured the Justice Department to overcome logistical, legal and political impediments. El-Sheikh and an associate, Alexandra Cote, who were captured together in Syria, were brought to the American courtroom for a trial and eventual verdict. And now we're joined by Susan Tehrani from New York. Susan, what is the significance of this verdict?
Right, James, as you mentioned, really somewhat of a closure for some of these families of the victims of this gruesome crime. Really, they worked for years to secure some kind of conviction, pressuring the Justice Department for almost a decade to overcome legal, logistical, and political impediments to bring Al-Sheikh and his associates, Alexandra Cote, who was captured with him in Syria, to an American courtroom. And this happened under the Trump administration with Attorney General Bill Barr, when he agreed with the British in an agreement that he wasn't going to go with the death penalty, and that's when the British shared intelligence and brought these militants, these convicts, basically to an American courtroom to face justice in the state of Virginia. After this hearing, this court case, we heard from the family of Diane Foley, the mother of journalist James Foley, who was beheaded on camera back in 2014. She said 10 years is a long time to wait, but we finally have justice for these 4 brave Americans. And also, we also heard from Marcia Mueller, the mother of Kyla Mueller, who was an aid worker in her 20s. She died under mysterious circumstances. She was an aid worker forced into slavery and then raped by Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi. She was not beheaded, but her body has not been found. Marcia Mueller said that it was hard to find peace until her daughter's body could be recovered in Syria. There isn't really going to be closure. That's what she said. I'm thankful for what the prosecutors have been able to accomplish, but I'm going to keep trying to find Kyla.
Susan Tehrani in New York. Susan, thank you. "62-year-old Frank James has been accused of shooting 10 people on the New York City subway. He's been remanded by the US federal court in permanent custody after he was denied bail. The US District Court in Brooklyn has also ordered that he undergo a psychiatric evaluation of the accused.
Frank James has been charged by complaint in Brooklyn federal court with 1 count of violating 18 U.S.C. sections 1992 A7 and B1, which prohibits terrorist and other violent attacks against mass transportation systems. He has been apprehended. He will be arraigned in federal court in Brooklyn, and if convicted, he will face a sentence of up to life imprisonment.
Frank James was arrested after a 30-hour manhunt by patrol officers without incident. He's been detained on terror charges for violating a law that prohibits terrorism and violent acts against mass transportation, and is accused of firing 33 shots with a 9mm Glock and detonating a smoke bomb in a packed subway on April 12th. While authorities have found no links between him and any terrorist outfits, the police have uncovered a trail of evidence linking James to the subway attack. The complaint that detailed the items were presented in court. A bag found on the scene contained a Glock handgun, which James bought in Ohio in 2011. It also contained a plastic container of gasoline and multiple bank cards, which had James's name on them. A U key was connected to the van that James had rented in Philadelphia a day earlier. Authorities also tracked the purchase of a gas mask to James through an eBay account. Other than this, authorities also found a neon orange construction jacket, which had a receipt for a storage unit in Philadelphia registered to James. Authorities also found ammunition and other gun paraphernalia in James's storage unit, based on which the prosecutors allege that the plan was premeditated. The police are still trying to determine the motive behind the attack. So far, no official reason behind the attack has been shared. This case is just the latest in a long list of mass shootings in the US. You don't need a license to carry concealed weapons in at least 23 states. Anyone who purchases a gun from a federally licensed firearms dealer is vetted through the National Instant Criminal Background Check system. The only red flag stopping anyone from buying a gun is a felony conviction, or a dishonourable military discharge, or involuntary commitment to a mental health facility. But the databases of which the government relies on are often flawed, outdated, or incomplete.
Dans mes bras, venez dans mes bras. C'est violent, c'est inceste. Le soir va venir dans l'Europe. Personne jamais ne relève leur incohérence.
The French presidential elections are just over a week away, and both the candidates have ramped up their rhetoric against each other. In the latest, the far-right challenger Marine Le Pen has urged France to defeat elitism. She's reached out to left-wing voters to beat President Emmanuel Macron, and took aim at the president, saying he was not the man of a new era, but the last avatar of a system that run its course.
Mes premières mesures concerneront le pouvoir d'achat, avec la baisse de la TVA sur l'énergie, l'essence, le fioul, l'électricité. Et le passage à 0 TVA sur un panier de 100 produits de première nécessité. C'est urgent!
Her comments come as President Macron received the backing of multiple former presidents. After Nicolas Sarkozy, former socialist President François Hollande also threw his support behind Macron, calling on France to vote for Macron for the sake of the European future.
J'appelle les Français, compte tenu de l'enjeu, à voter pour Emmanuel Macron.
The most recent polls have shown a tight contest between Macron and Le Pen on April 24th. Opinion polls show Macron leading with 53% and Le Pen at 47%. But such a margin is a little too close for comfort for the president's supporters. Prime Minister Jean Castex campaigned for Macron, had this message for those who voted for Le Pen in the first round.
Eh bien, je leur dis que nous sommes exposés à une régression et à un danger, à peut-être même à des explosions sociales. Moi, vous savez, je suis un homme attaché à l'ordre républicain. Je respecte tout le monde. La France avance, je crois que la France cohabite.
Analysts say that the choice of voters who back the third-placed candidate will be crucial in determining the outcome. The two contestants are gearing up for the final phase of the campaign scheduled on April 24th. The top two runners will meet for their only live debate on the whole campaign. Meanwhile, hundreds of demonstrators clashed with police in the streets around the Sorbonne University in Paris. The students were protesting against the presidential elections, opposing both the candidates. The protesters are afraid that neither would do enough to protect the poor or the environment. Our correspondent Ross Cullen has sent us this report from Paris.
As France votes to elect a new president, it's Macron versus Le Pen again. Macron, Le Pen advanced to April 24th runoff. Pro-European economic liberal versus far-right nationalist. Will Macron win a second term?
Et donc, est-ce que...
Or will France choose its first woman leader?
The French president has himself admitted that this election...
WION gets you ground reports from Paris. French election 2022. WION continuous coverage.
The situation in Shanghai is going from bad to worse. New infections are breaking records. The city of 25 million has become the heart of China's biggest coronavirus outbreak since the peak of the first virus wave in Wuhan over 2 years ago. Jeopardising China's adherence to a strict zero-COVID policy, China's reported over 25,000 cases in the last 24 hours, with most of them being reported from China's financial hub, Shanghai. And in a bid to contain the spread of the virus, 25 million residents have been locked in the city of Shanghai, further triggering frustrations on social media over the difficulties of getting enough food amid China's stringent COVID-19 policy. Meanwhile, Shanghai is converting residential buildings into quarantine centres to house a mounting number of COVID-19 cases. But the move is sparking anger and protest among residents who are being forced to leave their apartments. In a video that circulated on social media on Thursday, residents can be seen outside a compound shouting at rank officials who are holding shields labelled police. Some of them even scuffled with hazmat-suited officers who are ordering them to surrender their homes to COVID-19 patients. Officials are also forcing residents into state quarantine. This video on your screen shows officials dragging a man into a quarantine centre, where the conditions are appalling. Hundreds of people cramped into COVID quarantine facilities and are separated by less than an arm's length. Some of them who tested positive can be seen sitting on their suitcases and other belongings that are strewn next to them. Beijing has vehemently been insisting on following the 2020 COVID playbook that relies on mass testing, quarantine and lockdowns. The approach has already hurt millions of people's lives, with scores moved into makeshift quarantine camps.
在检测过程当中严格的执行1米间距，避免了人员的聚集，同时又确保经过一个潜伏期和双采双检，避免。
North Korea has unveiled a glamorous high-rise apartment building that now adorns Pyongyang's skyline. The 80-storey skyscraper is part of Kim Jong-un's latest attempt to turn the capital into a quote-unquote people-first city. But more than a dream come true. The buildings turned people's nightmares into reality. Watch our next report to know more.
An 80-story skyscraper in North Korea's capital, completed in the past week, is the latest in a push by leader Kim Jong-un to turn Pyongyang into what state media calls a people-first city. Glamorous high-rise apartment buildings now adorn Pyongyang's skyline, and for many outside the country, living in the penthouse might be considered the dream. But what if you had to take the stairs up and down every day? According to defectors from the country, that nightmare is a daily reality. Defector Jung-si Woo says that people who live in these penthouses are poor rather than rich, and that the water can't be pumped up because of low water pressure. He also said his friend who lives on the 28th floor of a 40-story building had never once used a lift in his life because they never worked. Housing is assigned in the socialist state, while the buying and selling of apartments is technically illegal. But historically, few people have ever wanted to live on the highest floors. While the power supply has improved significantly under Kim, North Korea still grapples with shortages and sometimes shoddy infrastructure. Many have turned to individual solar panels during the blackouts, which is only enough to power small electronics. On Wednesday, state media said that out of 50,000 planned new apartments in Pyongyang, 10,000 had already been completed. And though Kim has vowed to improve construction quality, experts caution that there's still a long way to go.
Last week it was alleged that Malian soldiers had killed around 300 civilians in Mura. And Russia's private military contractor Wagner Group is suspected to have been involved in the killings. Here are the stories.
It was market day in the town of Mura when Malian troops, backed by white mercenaries, descended in helicopters and opened fire on bewildered residents. That's according to the accounts of eyewitnesses like stall owner Amadou. He saw soldiers fan out on the morning of March 27th and ran home, but was arrested hours later and taken to a riverbank on the outskirts of town. There, he said, thousands of men were sat with their hands tied. Over the next 4 days, he and 2 other witnesses describe how the men sat in the blazing sun with little food or water and watched as soldiers took groups to the edge of a mass grave and shot them.
They took 15 to 20 people. They lined them up about 100 meters from us. They made them kneel down and they shot them. It's distressing. It's unimaginable. It's hard to speak about it. I thank God I got out of it. A lot of my friends were killed there.
Reuters cannot independently verify their information or visit Mura, but the accounts bolster evidence gathered by Human Rights Watch. Last week, it alleged that Malian soldiers, assisted by suspected Russians, killed around 300 civilians in Mura. The town of 10,000 people is under the control of a militant group linked to Al-Qaeda. Mali's army says it killed 203 insurgents there during a military operation. it denies reports of executions and has not responded to a request for comment. Wagner Group, a Russian private military contractor that recently started working with the Malian army, could not be reached for comment. But the reports raise concerns over the presence of Wagner. Western powers strongly oppose the group's intervention, warning that it could stoke violence. The United Nations has accused Wagner of killing civilians while working in Central African Republic. Russian officials have denied the reported abuses. The EU has imposed sanctions on Wagner, which it says works on the Kremlin's behalf, though Moscow denies ties. Mali's military police have opened an investigation, as has the United Nations, though the UN says it has not been granted access to Mura.
The world marks Good Friday today. Catholics around the world commemorate Jesus' death by crucifixion. We leave you with a quick roundup of how different parts of the world are celebrating this holy day. As I, William Denslow, bid adieu from New York. Thanks for watching.
This week,
Israel claims to have destroyed a rocket launching site used by the Hamas.
Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has made no mention of any halt to the offensive.
We at WION have tracked this story from the word go.
WION reports on the latest health threat before the world.
People diagnosed with the coronavirus in Russia may be deported back to their home country.